Take a risk. Live dangerously. Hello friends, welcome back to the channel. If you are new here, my name is Sarah and I make videos about health and fitness and all of those things, endurance sports. So if you're into that sort of jazz, you can hit all of those buttons down below. They won't give you a zonk, I promise. If they do, you may want to look at your computer or mobile device. Sounds like a you problem, not a me problem. Zonk is a very official term. Or I'm an idiot. I don't know. You try to hit the buttons anyway. Take a risk. Live dangerously. Thanks for coming. But today's video, we are talking about workout number 1 of the Zwift Academy series, and I'm here to help to prepare you mentally, physically, and of course emotionally for the real tears that you are about to endure by going through this program. Zwift Academy is a tough program. I've talked to several of you in the comments who are beginners who have wondered if this is the right program for you. And I've encouraged you to go ahead and try it. Throw your hat in the ring. There's no harm in looking at these types of workouts and try to push to your limits. You don't know what your limits are until you kind of crash into them. So yes, it will be difficult and you may be working above your capability. And yes, you may fail one or several of these workouts. Hell, those of us who are experienced may fail some of these workouts. That's okay. What I'd like to do in these videos is not only prepare you for what's to come, but maybe give you some actionable advice as to how you might be able to modify some of these workouts so that you can still get through them and get the intended benefit instead of just kind of crashing into what you perceive as failure and just pull the plug and quit. Try to get through. I want to get all of you through the program and try to do so successfully so you can have that sense of pride. There's absolutely no pride lost in trying to modify these workouts and tweak them to your ability. It's all about getting a benefit for you. It's to make you stronger and fitter as an athlete. Quitting because you think that you're not hitting those marks exactly as prescribed is not going to do you any benefit. Doing a little bit less than what it's prescribing, but still getting the workout done, that's going to give you a benefit. So without any further ado, let's talk about workout number 1. Workout number 1 is called Over Unders. And this is a specific type of workout that is intended to work over and under your FTP. I know, this is really tough original nomenclature here. But the purpose of an over-under workout is to help to enhance your lactate clearance. And this is done by having you work around that VO2 max level zone, and that's working above your lactate threshold. That means you're building lactate up in your system at a rate that is faster than your body and your muscles are able to clear that lactate. And when that happens, you build up hydrogen ions, you make an acidic environment in those muscles, and that's where you generate that lactic acid burn, and that is when you start to feel the fatigue and your muscles start to break down. Now the purpose of this structure is to put you in that zone and really push that limit, but then work that under interval, which is almost a recovery. This is not a full recovery, but it's bringing you in that aerobic power system that gives your muscles an opportunity to clear that lactate before you supersede that break point where the hydrogen ions build up too much and your muscles start to fail. So this is meant to enhance your ability to maintain sustained efforts at a higher percentage of your threshold, as well as your ability to work for longer periods of time at your VO2 max. So you don't necessarily need to hold 6 minutes solid at VO2 max to get a similar benefit. That's where the structure of the over-unders come into play, where you're not getting a full recovery, but you're spending a lot of time up in that VO2 max zone and you're kind of pushing that high end up. So it's a very valuable type of workout. Now you may see these structured in different ways on different platforms and in different structured workouts. That's okay. You'll see all sorts of different shapes to the graph. Sometimes you'll see 1-to-1 ratios, 1 minute over, 1 minute under, 2 minutes over, 2 minutes under. You might see a 1-to-2 or a 2-to-1 ratio. You might see something that's a little bit more spiky that looks like a ramp up and a ramp down. They are all accomplishing the same thing. And people will say different ones are easier or harder depending on basically your development within those power systems, but they're all doing the same thing in terms of its intended benefit. Now, this particular workout is probably a little bit more on the advanced side. So as I go through the structure, I'll talk about how some of you who are beginners or might be finding in the very first set, in the first interval, that you're struggling so hard that you don't know how you are going to get through. I'll talk about how you might be able to modify to still get that intended benefit, but not fail the workout. So I'm gonna go through this structure real quick first. It's very straightforward. You start with a 10-minute ramping interval for a warm-up, starting at 50% of your FTP and working up to 80% of your FTP. Then there's a 1 minute activation interval that continues that ramp from 80 to 90%, really starts to activate kind of that aerobic level effort and really starts tickling on that sweet spot type of effort. So it really gets the muscles warmed up. Now, for those of you who need a longer warm up, I know several people out there who just need a little bit more time to get the muscles ready to work. That's fine. Spend a little bit more time in the pen, or maybe cruise around Tempus Fugit for 10, 20, 30 minutes, whatever it is that you need. Keep it easy, zone 1, zone 2. Maybe you might want to do a couple priming sets. That's going to be up to you, but I think that for the workout itself, really getting a total of 11 minutes of warm-up and activation should be enough to get most people warmed up. Now, after that 1 minute activation set, you're going to go into 3 minutes of recovery at 60% of your FTP. Should be able to bring your heart rate back down to a baseline and then get yourself ready for the very first interval. Now, the 3 sets of over-unders are identical. They are set up as follows. They're going to be 2 minutes on at 115% of your FTP, followed by 1 minute under at 95% of your FTP. Then you flip the script a little bit and you go 1 minute over at 115% of your FTP, and then 2 minutes under at 95% of your FTP. I'll talk about that a little bit more in detail momentarily. Then you get a full 1-to-1 ratio of working set to rest. So that's going to be a 6-minute block, followed by 6 minutes of full recovery at 55% of your FTP. If you need to turn that down, go ahead and do that, whatever it takes to recover. You might find that in the first minute, you might want to turn that down a little bit. That's going to be contingent on you. And then you're going to move back in to the next 2 identical sets. And at the end of the workout, you get a 5-minute kind of descending cool down starting at 55% of your FTP. And I think it goes down to something like 35 or 36% of your FTP. And I encourage you, if you have the time, to extend that cool down a little bit, just to kind of work the heaviness out of the legs. It can be very helpful for a workout like this. Now, I want to focus a little bit on those working sets because those are going to be tough. 115% of your FTP is a pretty high level of VO2 max. You're starting to encroach a little bit on that almost zone 6 anaerobic level power effort in a 7-zone model. That's tough. 2 minutes at 115% is not sustainable for a number of folks. Notwithstanding, you are going to also have to do that valley at 1 minute at 95% of your FTP, and then do it again at 150% for a minute. So here's what I recommend you do. If you know already that you can't hold 115% of your FTP for 2 minutes, or you find in that first interval that you just know you're not going to be able to finish the workout, it's going to hurt and be uncomfortable, but you should know the difference between I can't sustain this, I can't do this 6 times. Then what I would recommend that you do is have that companion app handy, have it open and tandem with whatever primary device you are going to be running Zwift on, and you're going to turn the bias down. Now, I would recommend doing between 92 and 95%. So you can do that right on that front page. I'll put a screen grab somewhere here. You just press that plus or minus button. And if you turn that bias down to 92 or 95%, that's going to keep you between 105 and 110% of your FTP. So you're still working in that VO2 max zone, and you're going to get that intended benefit, but it's going to be at a more achievable level for you to sustain those efforts and to get through the entire set without extra recovery there. So you might want to play around with that. However, the caveat there is that you have to be a little bit quick on the draw, because when you go to the under effort, I would not recommend doing those at 92 to 95%, because at that point you're moving down into your tempo zone, and that's really defeating the purpose of the workout. You're still going to get a benefit by working those VO2 max efforts for sure, but if you can manage to kind of do the 100% for the unders and maybe 95% for the overs, you're going to get closer to what the intended benefit is for the lactate clearance. Do whatever you need to do to get through the workout, but don't be afraid to play with that bias to really get through that workout without failing. You may also find that the first interval is going to be very difficult. Sometimes that first interval feels impossible, and then you move into the second and third interval. You may find counterintuitively that your condition will actually improve after the first set, and you are getting warmed up, and interval number 2 or set number 2 and set number 3 actually supersede set number 1 in terms of performance. So be open to that type of progression as you go through. It's very common for a lot of us to see that happen, especially if maybe there's a little bit of fatigue lagging from previous days. Now, if turning that bias down isn't quite enough to get you through those intervals, you can also introduce some micro rests. You'd be surprised at how quickly you can get back on top of the gear and really reassert your control over those intervals if you just take 5, 10, 15 seconds of a brief respite to just bring that heart rate down just a beat or two per minute, and then you can all of a sudden get back on top of that gear and find your way through. You might get through that first 2-minute interval, and then maybe you need to take a 10 seconds, 15-second micro rest, but then you're able to get back on for that under interval and then get all the way through the rest of that particular set. Sure, you might not get the full star for that interval, but it's not about getting the stars, it's about getting the intended benefit. And if that's what it takes to get you through these sets, that's what's required to get the fitness benefit. And over time, you'll find that you will need those rests less and less. And you can attack that a number of different ways. You can just pause the workout if you're doing it solo. You can turn off erg mode and just spin a little bit easier. You can just completely stop. You can backpedal, whatever it is that you need to do. You might need a little bit of activation energy to get those cranks moving again if you're in erg mode. But those brief little rests can do a lot to get you through the workout. And it's definitely going to be better than just quitting full stop because it just hurts so much. Those are the two approaches I would take to struggling through that level of intensity, just to get most of the intended benefit, right? Done is better than perfect. If you can get through it without quitting or failing by making these little tweaks, it's going to pay dividends in the long run. The other thing you should be cognizant of during those working sets is breathing and body control. When you are working these hard efforts, it's very easy to get yourself into this body English where you're just wrenching all over the bike and your form starts to fall apart. And don't get me wrong, as you get towards the end of the workout, it might be all you can do to get through the interval as prescribed. I get it. But early on, while you're still a little bit more fresh, do your best to be cognizant of that. Try to drive that power from your hips because your heart rate and your perceived exertion is actually going to go up if you're just lumbering all over the bike. Be controlled in your breathing as well, right? If you're just, you're not delivering oxygen to those muscles. You don't actually have to breathe like that. It may feel like your breathing is getting out of control, but you can get a little bit of control over it. You're still going to be labored, of course, but if you can be a little bit controlled, generating those breaths from that belly area and really expelling that CO2, which is critical, and letting the oxygen come in naturally, it's going to help you to deliver that much needed oxygen to the working muscles, especially when you're in those under efforts where you're working more aerobically there. Now, after those sets, you are going to move into the recovery set. Recovery is pretty straightforward, right? Spend the first minute really focusing on bringing that heart rate down. I brought my cadence way down for those intervals and just focused on letting my heart rate drop into my zone 2. Depending on your fitness, your heart rate may decline a little bit slower. You might need 2 minutes to get that heart rate down, whatever it takes. If you need to turn that bias down for the recovery set, that's fine as well. Recovery is recovery. If it's 55, it's too high for you in the moment, turn it down to 40, right? Do whatever you need to do to get through that recovery set, turn erg mode off, whatever. And once you get back in control, you can kind of turn erg mode back on or turn that bias back up and recover the rest of the 6 minutes in that prescribed zone. Now, as you get to that last minute, I'd recommend starting to ramp that cadence back up. What you want to try to do is start these intervals with the cadence a little bit high. They're going to prompt for that in the workout instructions. You need to give yourself some room for attrition. What happens as we fatigue, we naturally drop our cadence because we can't really get our heads around or bodies around producing that high contraction rate and that torque. So we start to rely more on that torque end of the equation, which seems a little counterintuitive, but it's very natural for us to do this. If you're able to start those intervals at a higher cadence, as you drop off, you're still at something sustainable. But if you're starting those intervals at 80 RPM, because maybe that's your natural cadence, as you start to drop off with fatigue, now that brings you down to 60, 65. The torque at 60 to 65 RPM for these intervals is very difficult and unsustainable for most people. So give yourself some room to drop off and settle in comfortably. Whatever that cadence might be, it's going to really set you up for a little bit more success. And then, of course, like I said, focusing on that body position and that breathing and basically surviving these intervals because they are tough. Now let's talk about nutrition very quickly. I talked about this in my last video. Fuel. Sugar, sugar, sugar. You don't necessarily have to fuel this in ride because it's short. I believe it's 45 minutes or 48 minutes, something like that in length. So being fueled before you go into this workout is perfectly fine, or maybe topping up with something like a gel right in the very beginning of the workout just to carry you through the remainder of the sets. What I did is I had my lunch meal somewhere about an hour beforehand with a decent profile of carbohydrates and protein. And then at the very beginning, as I was warming up, I took in one gel with 20 grams of carbohydrates that just topped me up, gave me some preparedness to go through the next 3 intervals. I was also sipping a little bit at a drink mix bottle. That was probably another 20 grams of carbs. I was really just sipping at it, so most of what I got at the beginning of the workout came from that gel. If you drink a little bit more heavily, you might be able to provide a little bit more sugar benefit from something like a Gatorade or an SIS, whatever type of drink mix that you use for that additional energy. But it was enough to get me through the workout. I can't stress this enough. Going into this workout fasted is just, it's not going to generate a performance benefit for you. There really is no value in doing that. If you just can't eat in the morning and you do your workouts early, you might have to deal with what you have. But if you just actively choose not to fuel your workouts, you are leaving performance on the table. You get some extra watts, especially for workouts like this. An endurance ride, sure, do that fasted, but do these workouts fueled, either right at the beginning of the workout or before the workout with whatever your preferred fuel of choices. Might be some oatmeal, some toast and peanut butter, whatever you like, right? Just bring in some sugar on board to give you that energy, that quick usable energy that you're going to need for these really high intensity intervals. And then after your workout, I highly recommend refueling as soon as you are able with a good maybe 4-to-1 ratio of carbohydrates to protein, topping up those glycogen stores. That's going to facilitate recovery and muscle rebuilding so that you're ready for the next workout down the line and you're not just digging yourself a hole. So this stuff is important, especially for those of you who are learning how to manage structured training. These workouts are hard. Set yourself up to succeed with pre, during, and post-ride nutrition for these. But that's pretty much it, guys. That is about as solid an overview and advice as I could give for these workouts. I want you guys to go into these workouts feeling strong and confident and know that you have a plan A, a plan B, a plan C, anything that you can do to just not quit the workout. Failing is fine. We all fail sometimes, but giving yourself every opportunity to get through this workout and get as much of the intended benefit as possible so that you don't feel like you're just wasting your time and grinding your gears, no pun intended. I want all of you guys to get as much benefit from this program as possible and be stronger athletes 4, 6, 8 weeks from now. So if you have any questions, comments, or concerns, let me know down below. If you got any value out of this video, please do me a favor and hit that like button. It really does help to push this video out to more people who are using this platform that could get some benefit from it. Subscribe if you haven't already. And as always, I'll catch you in the next one. See ya.